The way you would set this up, you can use a basket. I've sometimes taken an alignment rod and stuck it in the ground so that it's in a similar spot. But once you get set up here, you would move the basket so that it's about 2 fingers away from the back of your lead calf. And if you do early extend, I would say there's no shot you're gonna make contact with the bucket. If your pelvis moves forwards, your legs will tend to drift towards the ball as well. And I think this is nice because if done correctly, and you can start to sort of back your left hip out of the way, you're gonna start to get a little connection of the calf and the bucket.
I want to talk to you today about Live View Golf. Now, you guys hear me say all the time that you need feedback when you're practicing. You need to know if you're actually doing what you're trying to do, and the best way to give yourself feedback ultimately is video. And not only is video the best way to give yourself feedback, but being able to see yourself simultaneously as you're doing a movement is the best form of video feedback. It's the best way I've seen to make changes in your swing and be able to correlate the differences between your feels and your reels. Live View is super easy to use and set up. Simply set it up behind or in front of you. You connect it with your iPad or phone, pop that on the ground. You can actually do your practice, see yourself as you're doing it, the best way to expedite your process. I encourage you guys to check out Live View Golf. We'll put a link in the description down below with a coupon code. All right guys, Eric here out at the Bethlehem Golf Club. In today's video, some never before seen on this channel, early extension drills, 3 early extension drills. Say 1 big one, 2 other ones we're gonna add in, lower body focused early extension drills. To my right here, Mr. Ryan Hager, coaches at a Plainfield Country Club, New Jersey PGA Teacher of the Year, Golf Digest Best Young Coaches, phenomenal Instagram. We're gonna link all that, his website info in the description down below. So Ryan, early extension, right? We'll use that term so everyone knows what we're talking about. I saw this as one of your drills that we've never done a video on, another one, never before seen, drills for early extension. There's a couple of them that I think are really good that can help a lot of people struggling with early extension. The first one that I believe to be your favorite, right, has to do with an object behind your leg. Can you kind of talk us through this one?
Absolutely, yeah. Shout out to my friend Bobby Brown. He and I used to work together. He came up with this drill and I use it pretty frequently. It's a good way to kind of think about using your lower body. It gives you some nice feedback when done correctly, and it helps you to start getting like your lead hip to start moving back and out of the way to kind of rotate the pelvis. The way you would set this up, you can use a basket. I've sometimes taken an alignment rod and stuck it in the ground so that it's in a similar spot. But once you get set up here, you would move the basket so that it's about 2 fingers away from the back of your lead calf. And if you do early extend, I would say there's no shot you're gonna make contact with the bucket. If your pelvis moves forwards, your legs will tend to drift towards the ball as well. And I think this is nice because if done correctly, and you can start to sort of back your left hip out of the way, you're gonna start to get a little connection of the calf and the bucket.
And so when you're doing this one, if you could just take a normal setup again, so I can click. So, and this, any range bucket, box, object, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we're an inch behind your left calf and then we're pushing back into it. And that's happening as a byproduct of what, like the lead leg straightening, the hip pushing back?
Yes.
Yeah.
A bit of a pressure shift into the left heel for me.
Yep.
I feel a lowering of my chest as I do that.
Yeah. And how many people do you have come in? Ryan, I say it's one of the things, frankly, whether they need more of it or not, most all golfers that come in that I talk with are like, hey, dude, I'd love to see 2 cheeks at impact. I love to see my hip depth, right? I think it's one of those things that almost all golfers are looking for, whether they need it or not.
Yeah, you see the best players in the world do that stuff, so trying to copy them is generally a good thing to do.
Copy the best.
Yeah.
So just to clarify too, if we can do a setup, early extension, the bad version, pelvis in towards the ball, head away from the ball, right? Yeah. Wrist releasing, probably pressure too far forward on your lead toe too long. Those would be some of the common traits. And then if we go from that poor early extension into the good version, the differences there you're feeling are what?
The thing that stands out to me is a pretty strong, it's almost like I'm doing a side crunch. You know, if I do this in the gym sometimes where I grab a cable and I pull it this way, there's a bit of side bend as I'm rotated.
Yes, me too.
So that's the thing that stands out to me the most. I obviously feel my leg touch the basket, and then I feel a pretty good stretch up the entire left side of my body.
And that should be such a good visual, Ryan, if you don't mind doing kind of that good to bad pose again. From both angles, you guys can see the differences in his body motions. The pressure way back towards the heel relative to the early extension, right? Yeah, there's the bad version, and then the good version, pressure back. The lead leg extending, right? Let's do the good version. The lead leg extension, the hip being back. Obviously, like you mentioned, look at the crunch here he has compared to normal, where his trail shoulder is, how that allows the trail arm and wrist to maintain bend. It gives you the shaft lean, right? A lot of those good things for free. You also see from the down the line, look at where the head motion is and how far forward this way. Do the bad early extension. So the stand up off the wall, standing up through posture. A lot of that stuff, whether it's, regardless of how you directly do it, the point I'm making is if you get the leg back to the bucket, that can be a way that can get you some of those upper torso feels for free, or vice versa.
Absolutely.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. So that's the nice thing about it, is the feedback of pretty simply just, I think this feels easy for a lot of people. Oh, that's all I have to do is touch the bucket and hit the ball. Like, I can do that. And
maybe easy but exaggerated?
Yeah.
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 Can we demonstrate a couple of these?
Sure.
Yeah. So a bucket or object about 1 inch behind the left calf, pushing back into it. And you're sort of feeling like 1 or 2, you know, rehearsal feel hit.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that one more again.
You use the word exaggerate. As I do this, I'm not trying to touch it. I'm trying to hit it down to the guy on the end of the range. I'm trying to really move the basket like as far as I can.
I can swear on here, but we're swearing. Yeah. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're doing this and practicing it, well, I'm gonna phrase it a different way. When you're doing this and practicing this, wouldn't you rather over-exaggerate, do the drill correctly, maybe not hit it perfect in the first one, but accomplish the movement goal?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to that point, you know, if you're doing some of the body motions correctly while you're working through this drill, you know, early extension typically comes with early release, a lot of cast.
Yeah.
You know, throwing the club a little bit early.
Let's go through why that is, just for a second.
It's because, I mean, you're making the distance from your shoulders to the ball greater.
Yes.
And so the only way to get to it is to basically fully extend both arms, release the club pretty early. You'll suffer from essentially no divot, a very high fluttery launch.
Yeah.
And so if those things continue to happen as you start to do this kind of stuff, you might hit the ground pretty early. So just like I think we said in the finish line drill video, you might hit some poor shots, but that's because you're doing one thing different and you need to start to learn what your wrists and your arms do in conjunction. You know, it's like you sometimes can fix all of it in one foul swoop, but often I think it takes tons and tons of, you know, rehearsals, doing things like that, kind of understanding where the wrists, elbows, shoulders kind of need to go.
Matching the pieces, right?
Yeah.
So like if you do the good version again, if we do the good leg back to the bucket version, and you do feel that oblique crunch and the trail shoulders lower, obviously with the player's torso closer to the ground, they need to feel, perhaps if they hit the fat shots, the trail arm much more bent.
Yes.
And maybe the trail wrist much more bent compared to normal. And it's funny, you know, like we said about the pull hooks or that one, it's actually a bad immediate result that's a sign of probably doing something correctly, right? So it's like, okay, you got the leg part right. Well, the arms are still early releasing like before. Perfect, that's good.
Yeah.
Now let's add the trail arm, trail wrist bend. Just like if someone's got an open face and you do something, you close the face, they pull hook it. Good, that's perfect.
Yes.
Now let's do the shaft lane. Now let's do the club pass shit, right?
For sure. And that's, I tell you what, that's an important thing about spending time with a coach is I see this stuff all day long, and when a person is working through it for the first time and they hit a horrendous shot, I'll usually say, great swing, bad strike. right? Like you accomplished your goal of moving differently. It just takes some repetition to square up the club face and hit the ball solid with a completely different movement pattern getting thrown into the mix. It's a
great point.
I mean, it's like a miracle every time you hit a golf ball. It's unbelievable.
The math
difficult.
behind it's just stupid.
It's unreal. So,
yeah, it's interesting. It's good. That's a good point too. Like making sure you're clear and committed to what you're doing and why you're doing that. So I know this is the main one for early extension, but we have like 2 other little drills that we can go with it. Let's pause for a second. We'll pull in the second drill. Okay, drill version number 2, Ryan. What the heck do we have on our left hip there?
This is called the Total Golf Trainer hip attachment.
Okay.
Comes in a pack of 3 different training aids. This one is great for a number of things, you know, kind of as the swing relates to the motion of your pelvis. And I use it a lot for rotation, but I've also used it for what we're going to talk about with early extension.
Early extension. Give us the goods, man.
So a reference just to kind of the setup that I use a lot. I got this from a friend of mine named Chad Middaugh, who's at Muirfield Village. When you get into what I would consider a pretty good neutral setup, if you sort of envision the belt being like the top of a bucket of water, you want to spill some water on the golf ball. And you're going to tilt your belt towards the ball a little bit. Maintaining that tilt in the golf swing is one way to sort of prevent early extension or maintain a little better spine angle. And what that would look like with this training aid is almost like you're trying to point the red ball on the end of this stick more down at the golf ball.
Yeah.
And so early extension, I think a lot of people just think of it as lateral motion towards the target. It's also got to do with the tilt of your pelvis, and that's a big thing that this helps you with.
So you're almost, and that's one of the, we were talking off camera about one of our buddies, JT, that was one of the feels that I really liked and I used for a long period of time, if we go up to the top of your backswing and pause, was the sensation that this stick or my left hip, would actually point down or belt buckle. So it's like this left rib cage and this thigh almost decreasing distance in transition as my belt buckle pointed down. Very difficult to have your pelvis move in towards the ball when you exaggerate those 2 feels.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's such a cool and easy visual for someone to do it. So is it sort of the sensation that they would feel is that downward tilting in early transition? Is that like the main timing of it?
Yep, and I think this is super helpful because that is a hard thing to think about. I think if you said to someone, fold your right arm in half, you could do that no problem. And then you say, tilt your pelvis like this, and they look at you like you have 3 heads. So, you know, core and pelvis control is a really challenging thing to get people to do sometimes. So this is I think a good visual way to get them to do that.
So you even like maybe having them feel a little bit more anterior pelvic tilt early in transition. Belt buckle down. Almost like the back of the rear end sternum pointing up towards the sky. I can't do it right now, but
that way.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's a sort of right away when you start down, right from the top of the backswing feel.
Yeah, it's a good transition move to start, you know, rotating, avoid some pull down with your arms and things like that. It starts using like the bigger muscles of your body to get you back to the golf ball.
Love it. So we have a little bit of a, I'll call it lead leg, hip kind of drill in the beginning. This again, a little bit of a tilting drill. We got another footwork, pressing the feet thing. Let's check that out next. Okay, so last one here, Ryan, fixing early extension, lower body. What do we got going on here?
Yeah, last but not least, this of the 3 is probably the easiest one to do. I think it, I don't know, just it's easier conceptually. It also, I think, is something that you can do and hit golf balls with the easiest and kind of expect decent shots.
Okay.
Call it the teeter-totter drill because it sort of makes your feet into 2 teeter-totters. You're going to stand on 2 alignment rods. I use 2 just because it's a more pronounced feel than 1. 1 would probably get the job done. And the purpose of this is sort of to feel how your feet are going to work on the ground and then how that runs up the chain into your pelvis to create a little better impact position. This is something I use too for backswings for people that kind of maybe stand out of their posture. We talked about sway before, you know, maybe creating a backswing like this versus if you get a deeper hip rotation going back, you should feel a little pressure shift into the right heel. So your foot will tip towards the heel in the backswing. The opposite's probably going to happen to your left side, where you get a little pressure towards the ball of the foot as you get up to the top. Transition then would be in sort of equal but opposite move, where you start shifting pressure from sort of the ball of the lead foot into the heel of the lead foot, and that's one of the things that can help sort of push the pelvis out of the way, maintain posture a little bit better, and get out of some early extension patterns.
Love it. When you set that up, it's sort of like right in the middle of your feet.
Yeah, honestly, this works the best if you have pretty flat shoes on. If there's like a big arch in the shoes that you're wearing, you might need something like a pool noodle would work too. If you stood through the center of a pool noodle,
like
that'd
take
be
your
pretty
shoes off,
pronounced.
maybe.
You can take your shoes off.
Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, a pair of Vans would probably be the best shoes to wear to do this, because they're just dead flat
and then
underneath.
When you're working through this, is sort of the take-home message being like, if we go too much towards our toes for too long, that's going to be correlated with the pelvis motion, right, the early extension.
Yeah.
And then sort of our idea would be, as we're working down, our pressure can get into our lead toe early, but then we're pushing back in.
Push backwards.
Yeah.
So another way I suppose you could do this would be to sort of slide these forwards. If you put them underneath more the ball of the foot, it might help you feel like you can direct the force backwards.
Yeah.
I like the instability that this gives you, though. I think it makes the golfer work a little harder, and generally when you work harder, you learn it faster.
And so when they're hitting that, they're really focusing on pushing into the lead heel in the downswing phase. That's kind of the main, And I know you have some of those pressure boards too I've seen you use, where you could also use something like that to push down into it. So
absolutely, yeah.
Sort of harder, more pressure into the lead heel, likely better for the early extender.
Yes.
Versus more into the toes, longer.
Absolutely, yeah. I think when you do this correctly, you might sort of lose your balance backwards until you start. The main thing you have to learn to not lose your balance in this direction as you try to shift that pressure towards the heel is side bend as you're rotating. That's going to level you out and sort of help you get here and through without feeling like you're going to go this way.
It took me a long time when I was first working on my early extension, and I'd be pushing my leg back, and I'm like, dude, my head's freaking going like 3 inches back. And they're like, well, like a little bit of side bend, head on the wall on the way down.
Yep.
Totally. That's a huge little add-on point there. When you're doing that weight back to the heel, that can almost be a video in itself. They will very likely have to feel like their head. I felt like my head, if this was like a wall or a line here, like my head was popping forward. Yep. My head felt way popping forward as my...
it counterbalances.
Yep. Yeah, that's a huge add-on point there.
Right.
So early extension, I think those are 3 killer lower body drills. We're gonna link a video at the end. We'll put a card on the screen for more early extension, like earlier in your swing causes, so you guys see all that stuff. But I think these are really good places to start to gain feels using video, obviously depending upon the root cause. So we'll put that card on the screen. Again, a little more earlier in your swing root cause stuff. We'll put the card for CogornoGolf.com. Would love to see you there.